You are rerunning for the position of association president.
I am.
Why?
I really believe that there is more that can be done in this role. I think I've gone after some of the hardest problems I could find in my 8 months so far, and I think I've made some pretty significant traction on that. And that notwithstanding, I came to St. Andrews 5 years ago, and it's just been a love affair ever since. It's a place that means a great deal to me. I had a job for next year, but I think this is more important.
Okay. Is it fair to say that a lot of your campaign is based on the fact you've been president for a year, you know what you're doing, you're kind of the continuity candidate? Are you relying on that more than your policies?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I think that's one of the strongest arguments for voting for me, because you can have as many great ideas as you like, but if you can't transfer them into tangibles, into value added for the student experience, like we did with the night bus, with 450,000 pounds of accommodation bursaries, with increased union funding, then it doesn't matter how good your ideas are. You have to be able to convert. But what we're coming with in the second term, and I strongly believe that there's some big projects that are worth doing. And I think having the experience certainly makes dreaming bigger possible.
Okay, so let's start by talking about these experiences that you mentioned.
Yes.
First off, I want to talk about the 70,000 block grant.
Yes.
For the union. Can we clarify, was that a one-off block grant for the association because of redevelopment? It's not a permanent thing.
So that was the rhetorical argument that we brought. We said redevelopment, this threatens our society, it could displace society. We have rising costs in the union. We don't want to harm the student spend. We need to insulate our societies. We need to insulate our student experience that we get through here. And fortunately, we got the 70,000 pounds, but that we went from something like 420,000 in the block grant last year to about 490. I think that's a number off the top of my head, but that will be recurring. So it's a one-off increase. So that's where the level is. Nothing's a guarantee, but the fact of the matter is our block grant hasn't been ever decreased. Okay. So.
Another point you bring up on your campaign website is matching every student with an employability officer.
Yes.
This hasn't happened yet, but can you kind of explain when will this happen? What's it going to be like?
So the pilot starts in April. We successfully negotiated this back in, I think, October or November, meeting with Proctor, Lorna Milne, and the Careers Center officials, and we were talking about bringing this idea that students right now don't have employability on their radar necessarily immediately from day one. So we look at the model of an academic advisor, one of the first people you meet when you come here. How can we do this for employability?
Some would make the argument that students don't really know their advisor. How will this be different with an employability advisor? Because you only see them for a couple of minutes a year.
So the rhetoric of that is true. Sitting with your academic advisor is a few clicks. Sitting with your employability advisor will be a much greater follow-up thing. So this April is why we're doing the pilot program, to assess the amount of resource necessary to make it useful to students. We have an incredible amount of support from CollegeGate. It's looking like a great program, and I think it'll add an incredible amount of value to our student experience.
Okay. Another major point you bring up is the Alumni Festival weekend.
Yes.
The first one is this year, and your manifesto, a large amount of it talks about how you want to increase this, make it bigger.
Yes.
Is one weekend enough?
No, I don't think so. Absolutely not. I'd love to do more weekends, but you got to start from somewhere. We've had an incredible partnership with the athletic union this year, greater than we've ever had, especially towards this goal. And it looks like it'll be quite a fantastic weekend, but quite frankly, we've only had 4 or 5 months planning it. What I'd really like to do in a follow-on year is we can now spend the next 12 months planning it. And I think you could have much greater turnout from people from far away. You have to book flights much sooner than, say, if you're living in Fife. But I think it could be an incredibly powerful asset for the association, an incredible contribution for the Students' Association to the current development agenda of the university.
Another major theme in your campaign is this £450,000 increase in accommodation bursaries. This isn't for this year.
Coming in over the next 2 years.
Coming over the next 2 years. Can you please just explain how this will be phased in and how can we trust that that is going to happen?
So it's you can trust that it's happening because it's been approved by the university court. You can look up the paper online if you like. You may have to FOI it, pardon me, but you can get it. It's from the December issue. The bulk of it, next year there's a £450,000 pot for accommodation bursaries, and the year after there's a £900,000 pot.
And with this money, will there be the same amount of money given in each bursary and just more, or are you going to change the amount given? What's your feelings on this? Because at the moment, £3,000 are given to each student. Will that remain the same, and there will just be more?
So what we've already improved this year is we were approached by students who actually received these bursaries saying the system's broken, I'm only getting £1,000. And they were getting £1,000 usually just once across their 4 years, which in the St. Andrews accommodation market is a drop in the bucket. It's extraordinarily expensive. And we also saw that in entrance students, there's the language of what's called a conversion metric. So if you're choosing between St. Andrews, Glasgow, and Edinburgh, say Glasgow and Edinburgh offer entrance students very early on and they know that they're going to get X amount of money. St. Andreans only maybe knew that they were getting £1,000 and they knew they were getting it late. So we've managed to get £3,000 and they can get it up to twice. So that's a steady improvement. I'd love to see more, absolutely, but nearly £500,000 of bursaries when you look at an accommodation market that really hasn't changed in 10 years, I think is a strong effort from a student president.
And a lot of your manifesto focuses on this idea of bursaries helping people in financial need. But one of the major questions that raises is, where is the money going to come from? You talk about extending the hardship fund. Yes. Can you just explain the difference between the hardship fund and the accommodation bursaries for me?
So accommodation bursaries are funded out of RBS. There is excess in accommodation bursaries if they're not taken up, which has been the case in the past, which is something that needs to be looked at for reform. And some of that money gets channeled to a hardship fund. There's a hardship fund and a discretionary fund that intermingle a little bit. But right now, the hardship fund is limited to home students. So accommodation bursaries is looking at more, so you're saying someone that is in need of accommodation bursary, you probably know that they're in need of an accommodation bursary when they're coming to St. Andrews, and they will likely be in need of an accommodation bursary for 4 years in my mind. The hardship fund looks at fluctuations based on family emergencies, on circumstance. Say a parent loses a job, gets ill, say a student gets ill, can't work. Say the currency in your country fluctuates so much that you're now paying twice in fees effectively as you were before. This happened in Russia this year. So right now we have no mechanism to protect international students the way we protect students at home. And when we have bright, talented students traveling from the 4 corners of the world, we need to do everything we can to help them.
So if the hardship fund comes from the excess of the accommodation bursaries...
Not only.
Okay,
yes.
Not only, but it would heavily rely upon that. Yes? At present.
At present, yes.
So if your policies to make accommodation bursaries more accessible, get them to people, encourage them to take them, there won't be any excess.
No.
How are you going to get more funds for the hardship?
So the hardship fund exists out with, but on top of that, anything left over from the accommodation bursary is added into it. I don't have the figures right off the top of my head for you, but what I can say is I've had a fair amount of success in winning resource, in winning money, in winning in this field for students, and I think if anyone's going to be able to do it, I think I'm a good candidate for that.
And talking about the hardship bursaries again, if you're extending it to international students,
yes.
Does this mean there will be less money available for home students?
No, and I think that's a interesting way to set it up. I don't think you should ever do this to the detriment of students that need it already. It doesn't mean, to extend it doesn't mean you take away. It begins with approaching saying, right now we're underserving, I mean, quite frankly, I think we're underserving students at home. I would like to see more money for them as well. But we also need to make sure we're giving an equivalent support to international students. So in no way would I go about trying to decrease what home students are receiving.
Okay. Another bold claim is this: seek 1,500 new beds within 15 months.
Yes.
I just want to ask, is that including the 5 Park redevelopment, which we already know is happening, or is this over and above that?
Over and above that. So the University Court, in just 2 meetings this year, after a lot of advocacy on our part, is finally reviewing business cases for how it might actually implement build new accommodation,
So
expand its portfolio.
They're looking at building on the Grange, at Albany Park, and we're at Fife Park.
Yes.
Going on top of that, if Albany Park is redeveloped, and Andrew Melville Hall is on the cards to be redeveloped in a couple of years' time, where will the affordable accommodation be? Can you ensure that the new Albany Park will also be affordable and it won't turn into the new DRA?
Yes, so what we've done is I took Ben Stewart down he's the Director of Residential Business Services. I took him down to Albany with me last week to talk directly to Albany students, who are the students that genuinely are most concerned about these issues, to clarify any concerns about displacement. He reiterated the university's commitment at the highest level. There's a court, I think it's an ordinance is the word. There's a court statement from about 2004 that a fifth of our bed spaces will remain at the lowest quartile of student accommodation in the UK.
And where will those beds be when Albany Park is redeveloped?
I think it'll probably be very heavily in Albany Park. A portion of them will be.
Okay.
And he also reiterated students were concerned, well, if Albany gets redeveloped, doesn't that mean that we're going to lose our space for a few years? And no, they're going to do it in a phased redevelopment.
Okay. And 1,500 beds.
Yes.
Are these all going to be university-owned accommodation, or are you including private accommodation?
No, it should be
university-owned?
It should be university-owned.
And where did you get this figure from?
1,500. So you look at Albany Park is roughly 340. It has to go under the knife for HMO regulations in the next 2 years. The current plans we're looking at are up to 1,100, so you have roughly 800 there. You have 500 acres at the Grange. Not 500 acres, pardon me. You have 5 acres at the Grange, which is quite substantial. Between the current zoning permission we have out at Fife Park, beyond what's currently being built, 1,500 beds in 15 months matches. I could have said 2,000 if I liked, but we are running a campaign, so.
So when you say secure 1,500 beds, you mean there will be plans for 1,500 beds?
I would want financial commitment. So if we don't secure financial commitment, that's a failure in my mind. So I think to brick and mortar from the ground up, you have to be realistic. Can you build that, but can you secure it? Absolutely.
Yeah. Even though the university has already said that they will be redeveloping Albany Park. So how can you claim it as an achievement for yourself?
What they said is we have to redevelop Albany Park. The question is whether we expand Albany Park when we redevelop it. And right now, if you don't have a strong advocate pushing the dire need for this, I don't think that's going to convert. I don't think it's going to happen.
Okay. Another point in your manifesto is to have town hall meetings.
Yes.
Where students can talk to the university officials.
Yes.
How are you going to get people to come along to these?
So exactly like what we did with Ben Stewart, have RBS incredibly influential and powerful in the university, and we managed to do it already on a small scale in halls. And I approached Ben and I said, the students of Albany are very concerned about low-cost housing, and I think it goes a long way towards student interface. It goes a long way towards, I can tell you as much as I like how much they're worried about this, but it has a much greater impact to hear firsthand from them. Will you please go down and we're successful? And I think that can easily be carried out into other areas of the university.
How can you ensure that the university officials will listen to what the students are saying?
To be frank, you can't ensure anything. You can't ensure anything in this world. But I very strongly believe that in a town with 3 streets, there is no space for antagonism, and that no one in this university is here to ruin the student experience. No one wants to have a terrible exchange with students. They don't want to have a terrible relationship. I think it's very reasonable to think that they'd be able to do this.
And how often would these happen?
I think what you do is you probably want one major one a month if you wanted to do it, but have to work out the details and exactly how that worked. We'd have to look at whether you want it. I think residence, of course, is one that would occur regularly. I think student services would be very useful. If we talked with the proctor's office about education interface, that would be useful, and probably the director of sport as well, but that would fall in partnership with the AU.
Okay. You talk about having scholarships for students who are talented in the performing arts, other areas.
Mm-hmm.
Where's that money coming from?
You have to approach the university. The university has funds in other places it can devote. It's an argument of resource. So you say, saying right now, if we only gave 2 scholarships out of Saint Sports this year, and we gave I think it's roughly 25 music scholarships, but they're all in choral. I think we need to look at the idea of what is the St. Andrews student. What is the St. Andrews student that the university sells very frequently? And it's not just incredibly academic, it's usually quite well-rounded. They write for the Saint, they work in the Students' Association. And if this is what the university continues to sell as our student experience, they have a vested interest in supporting well-rounded students, and that's where this comes from. So you need to play, and this is something you get out of experience in the role, you need to play on the arguments that the university already buys into.
And what would you say to the argument that any money the university are getting in should be going to students in financial need first before extending to things like the arts, to things like sport?
Well, I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think often often people who can apply for a scholarship for sport or something else, you can also attach a financial need component. You know, if you have
So would these be means tested as well as sort of talent tested?
I think we could look into that. I think that's worth exploring, but we'll take a look.
And the last point in your manifesto, you say you want the university to be more socially responsible in their investments. What is that, and why should students care? So
the university actually has been, I say in my manifesto, I'd like it to maintain its commitments to socially responsible investing. So the university endowment, amongst other pots of money, are invested by the university court to accrue interest with fund managers. Right now it's Alliance Trust in Dundee. I was one of the court members that actually went out to the Alliance Trust headquarters this past fall to ask them, how is their socially responsible investing getting on? So you have a portfolio of companies that you invest in, and you will usually screen for companies that have so-called unethical practices, so say poor environmental practices, poor, say, companies that are investing in textiles in Bangladesh would not be on the rota. But this is important. This is a place where St. Andrews has been a leader. This is a place where universities can be a leader. Across the UK, and in fact even overseas, there's been a movement to push away from heavily carbon polluting companies and university investments. This is a hot button issue because endowments are enormously large sums of money. And where you put them is effectively can be thought of as a vote for what you believe in, because it serves companies well when they're being invested in. So I think it's important for universities to lead on this. It's something I worked in out with my time at university, and I'm incredibly passionate about it.
So this is obviously something that's important to you.
Yes.
But do you think it's something that the student body are going to find more important than perhaps other policies you could have been bringing up in your manifesto?
Well, so I don't think so. I think I think you need to cater for specific interests, like any manifesto does. I think. So 2 years ago, we had conflict-free St. Andrews. An enormous number of students turned out to have the university commit to its procurement practices where it wouldn't use conflict minerals. It wouldn't procure any laptops, any phones, anything that had conflict minerals in them. And that outpouring is very real. And for some students, that may be the most important issue, and you have to cater across a wide demographic.
Okay. You also mentioned extending the union's resources, the union's funding,
yes,
to non-affiliated societies.
Yes.
I would ask, isn't the union struggling to fund its own societies? How is it going to give support to everyone else as well?
I think it's not necessarily financial support. Right now what we have is we have a lot of space. We have some human resource in here, some advice, whether it be legal, so on and so forth, that can support endeavors. I think when I talk about this, I'm thinking about, we right now have quite a significant blind spot in how we support student societies. We have a very complex and robust society affiliation agreement, which works for some, but it has a lot of strings attached. And we have a kind of nebulous association project where we can fund and support and give space to one-off projects that come to us. But I've seen a lot of groups fall through the cracks in this. We have a blind spot. So there was the 600th book project came to us. I don't know if you've ever seen it. This beautiful 200-page spread. It's one of those lovely productions I've ever seen students make. And yet we didn't have. They weren't fit for a society under the current design, and they weren't fit for an association project, and we couldn't help them. We could at very least sell the book in the shop. That would be a huge help for entrepreneurial efforts. If student had another entrepreneurial aim or product they wanted, so being able to push that in the shop. There are means by which we can fill these gaps. So.
And talking about using the space, so
Yes.
if a non-affiliated society wants to use the space, are you going to let them, or will they be charged? Currently, we pay to use our office in the union. Is that something you're going to extend, or will societies be able to just use it for free?
Ideally, I really would like to see us move towards a lower cost model than that. If there needs to be an exchange, there may need to be some nominal exchange just to ensure if, say, the St. Trash is the room, that we have some kind of agreement and being able to, get our money back from you if we put a hole in the wall. But that's something we'll examine, bring it as low cost as we possibly can, and we'll see.
You also talk about the HMO ban.
Yes.
The HMO ban is something that's in place. It's something that's been put in place by the council. I think it's safe to say most students are against it. It's all very well to say you'll continue to oppose, but what practical steps can you take to get rid of this ban?
Well, getting rid of the ban is an extraordinarily cumbersome process, and I know there are other candidates in this race that think it's a strong idea or a feasible option, but quite frankly, it's not the most expedient. If you really want to carpet bomb town gown relations, for which we rely to continue raising weekend, or for which we rely on a great many things in our student experience, going after the HMO ban is the surest way to do it. I don't ever want to see the HMO ban extend beyond the preservation area that currently exists, and that's something there has been no extension of the HMO ban during my tenure, and I've advocated fiercely for this. To overturn it would probably require years of entrenched legal battles up at Fife Council. I think we need to devote our efforts to trying to build more at home, quite frankly.
Okay, so you're going to put building more university accommodation above getting rid of the HMO ban?
Yes, and also, so you look at the HMO ban, and they say folks in this argument will say HMOs allow more beds in town, it'll help with costs. Actually, if you look at the housing report, which was put out by the university about 2 years ago from our Center for Housing Analysis or something of that sort, they said that the HMO licenses are actually the largest contributor to the prices in St. Andrews. That when you have HMO houses, you frequently have international businessmen or women purchasing these homes and charging exorbitant prices, because you can charge not just two beds, but you can charge 4 beds at 500, 600, 700 pounds a month.
And then there's the other side of the story where people have 3-bed homes but are paying more in rent because they can't get HMO for the 3rd bedroom.
Yeah, but I think there's just faster ways to fix this.
Okay.
So,
Pat Mathewson, thank you very much.
thank you very much for having me.